Episode number 52.
This, for me, my wife and kids are my highest priority. Like spending time with them is highest priority, especially now. Like my kids are young, and my friend and mentor in this capacity, Jim Shields, he really put it in perspective for me. He said, "Look, Stu, you have 18 summers with your kids. And so every year you just subtract another summer off of that 18. And when you think about it in that way, like that hits you like right between the eyes. And so for me, like this time is precious because not only do we have a limited amount of time, but it is the time when they are, we shape their perspective, we shape their thoughts, we shape their beliefs, we shape their confidence.
Hi, you're listening to the Careers Beyond Motherhood podcast with your host, Janine Esbrand. I'm here to help working mums like you to thrive in your careers and in motherhood. I share tips, strategies, and inspirational conversations with awesome women to help reduce the struggle in your juggle.
Time for Say Mummy.
Hello, and welcome to the show. It's great to be back with you again. I am excited because Christmas is tomorrow. So as I record this, it is Christmas Eve 2018, and there is a lot to come in terms of family, friends, festivities, and seeing the little people get excited about gifts. So my son is 3.5 and my daughter is 1.5. So I know that my son at least is going to be really excited about getting multiple presents. As much as we try and tell people not to buy lots of things, they tend to get lots of things. And as much as I say there's no space for these new toys, they still get lots of toys. And so this year I've told my son that it is good to give as well as receive. So once he gets all of these toys come into the house, he's going to have to look at his current toys and ones that he's not playing with, and we're going to bag them up and give them to other people. So I think that's a good lesson to teach him, as well as a way to declutter the house. Before we dive into my interview with today's guest, I just want to let you know that I have a cold, and for some reason I get a cold around every Christmas time, and so my voice is not how it usually is, and I sound all bunged up and nasally. And so I just want to let you know, especially if you are a new listener, that this isn't how I always sound. Today on the show, we have the pleasure of speaking to Stu Mclaren. He is the former founder of the world's #1 membership platform for WordPress called Wishlist Member. And during his time there, he had the chance to serve and support over 60,000 online communities and membership sites. So he's gained a lot of experience and insight into what works and what doesn't with building a membership site. And he is now the go-to person for top-rated speakers, experts, and authors for building recurring revenue streams within their businesses. Stu is also a family man. He and his wife have 2 lovely children, and so they juggle having 2 businesses, a charity in Kenya, and raising their 2 little people. So if ever we need some advice from people who are doing the juggle and doing the juggle well, then Stu Mclaren is definitely someone who's going to be able to impart some wisdom on us. And I have to tell you that there are so many golden nuggets in the conversation that you're about to hear that you definitely want to stay tuned. Even if you're not building your own business, the principles that he talks about apply for all working parents. So without further ado, let's jump into my interview with Stu. Hi Stu, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to have you. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, well, thank you for having me, first of all. My name is Stu Mclaren. I have an amazing wife, Amy, who I've been married to now for 11 years. We have 2 young kids, my daughter, Marla, who is 7, and our son, who we adopted from South Africa, who is 4, and he's just about to be 5. So he's growing like a weed. That kid, doesn't stop growing. But so that's like, quick background. And then, for us, I have my business. My wife has her business. And then we also have a charity that we run as well, where we build schools over in Kenya. So it's a busy life all the way around, family, work, nonprofit, but we make it happen.
Awesome. There is so much I want to dig into and ask you about. So talk to me a bit about what your career looks like pre-parenthood and then what it looks like now. So I know your career journey has been really interesting. So can you kind of just give us a quick walk through how things have progressed
in your career?
Yeah, well, so I went to university for business, and I graduated with my honors business degree, and essentially that degree programmed us to go into the corporate world and be a corporate executive. And for whatever reason, I can't tell you why. I can't nail down specifically what it was, but I just always felt like a square peg in a round hole. Like I just never fit in that world. And so I realized, like, when I had signed on the dotted line to work with a big corporate company up here in Canada, and my parents were ecstatic. I had made it, like I had the great company job, I had the company car and the benefits and all that stuff. But it's like that gut instinct, like you can feel it, and my gut was just telling me, like, don't go down this path. Like, this is not you. Like, there was this very specific moment that I realized that I was not to go down that path. And so I remember one of my good friends, Braden, who's still one of my best friends to this day, was right there with me. And I turned to him and I said, I'm going to resign from the company. It was Maple Leaf Foods. I'm going to resign from Maple Leaf Foods before I even start. And he looked at me and he was kind of like, kind of confused, but excited. And then he said to me, he's like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I don't know, but I know that that's not what I want to do. And so sometimes, like, in life, knowing what you don't want to do is a first step toward finding out what it is that you do want to do. And that was absolutely the case for me. And so at that point, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just kind of like, I knew I didn't want to go into the corporate world. So what I ended up doing was I was really passionate about this subject of creativity. It took me from failing out of my first year of university to graduating top of my class, being named most outstanding male. And so I was really passionate about this. And I used creativity to, improve my school marks. I used creativity to land incredible jobs. I used creativity to ultimately win my girlfriend over, which is now my wife. Yeah. So I was just like, I'm going to speak about that. So I started sharing that message with high school and college students. And that ultimately started a path for me. It was like one foot in front of the other. And slowly but surely, things started to get more and more clear. And so I started that career, led me to learning more about how to grow my speaking business, which led me to working with a gentleman essentially running his company, putting on seminars each month because he taught people how to grow their speaking businesses. So I was like immersed in that. And then ultimately I left that and I was asked by one of the other speakers that was at those events if I would manage his affiliate program. And I said, what does that mean? And he's like, look, he said, you're really good speaking with people, you're really good at training, and you have a really keen sense of marketing. He's like, you'd be a great affiliate manager. So I said, sure. So I kind of started my own affiliate management business without knowing it. And we did really well and word spread. And before I knew it, I was getting asked to manage a whole bunch of affiliate programs. And that business just took off. That was like 2005. And but here was the problem. So you asked what my career was like before family and what it was like after. The problem was that business took off, but it was very demanding because it was basically my schedule was predetermined by my client's schedule. So when they were in a big promotion, I was in a big promotion. And what ultimately happened is when you have a whole bunch of clients, somebody is always in a big promotion all the time. And that just, the writing was on the wall. Amy and I, we hadn't married yet, but we had been together quite a long time. So it was definitely a topic of conversation. And ultimately we knew, like, I felt it. I couldn't keep doing that business if I ultimately wanted to settle down and have a loving marriage and have, a loving family, because at the end of the day, I was working nonstop. And it was great, for that period of time because I made, some great money and I learned a ton, but the writing was on the wall. So I started looking for an alternative. And ultimately what it landed me on was a mentor of mine said, you should teach what it is that you are doing to help grow these marketing campaigns and promotions. And you should do it inside of a membership site. And I didn't know anything about membership sites. And so I looked into it and I was like, okay, yeah, I see it. That'll help me teach a lot more people, but be able to do it in a more leveraged way. So I started down the path of trying to create my first membership site. And it was a nightmare. The software was like archaic and very difficult to use. And I had to learn about like server settings and HT access and all these things that were like way above my pay grade. And so I was venting my frustration to a friend of mine, and his name was Tracy. And I was like, dude, I just wish there was like a really simple solution so I could just like focus on creating content. And he said, well, what if we just create a solution together? And I said to him, I'm like, dude, did you not hear what I just said? Like, the technology is not my thing. Like, how am I going to create a solution? I'm not a developer. And he said, well, listen, I work with a really talented developer. Why don't we team up and do this together? And so ultimately we did. And that was my very first like product per se, a product business, which was a piece of software called Wishlist Member. And it was like perfect product, perfect time. That thing just took off. And ultimately I let go of all of my affiliate management clients, poured 100% of my attention into growing that business. And in a 6-year period, we grew it from 0 to over 70,000 online communities and membership sites that were powered by our software.
Wow.
And it was just an incredible journey. And I learned so much about like what makes a great membership and what were the few things that were making a big difference for people in terms of the sites that were growing year over year over year versus those that were flatlining or declining. And that ultimately led me to where we are today, which is a completely separate company that teaches how to grow highly profitable membership sites. And it's come from, working with literally tens of thousands of different online companies and industries and markets, from, teaching lesson plans to guitar lessons to photography and calligraphy and health and fitness and business and you name it. We have been supporting all kinds of different companies in all kinds of different markets grow their recurring revenue in their business. So that's kind of like the journey. And the before was that I worked a lot. It was a season of hustle, and it was a season of grind, and it was a season of just figuring things out and putting one foot in front of the other. But there was definitely a line in the sand moment when I knew that I couldn't continue doing that if and when I was going to get married and start a family. And ultimately, that's what led me down the path of membership sites.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many golden nuggets in there. So firstly, when you got to the point where you were like, what's important to me? So family is important to me. So as much as I like this business, I can't continue to do this and have family life in the way that I want to. So that kind of prompted you to look for a solution. And then it sounds like all along the way, you kind of were speaking to people and sharing with them your challenge. And it was other people that were able to input and tell you like, do you know you're good at this? These are your strengths. Like maybe you should look into this. And I think it's so important because often people get stuck where they are and they say, I don't want to do this, but I don't know what else I would do. And I love what you said about putting one foot in front of the other and speaking to people. And often you can't see it because you're so close to it, but people in your network can really tell you, you're really good at this. You should pursue this, or this is an opportunity.
Totally.
That's great.
I think too, like, if you're ever at that point where you don't know what it is that you want to do, you don't know what you're good at, like the worst thing that you can do is just stand still. Like the worst thing that you can do is just stand still and try to, intellectually figure it out. Because I'm telling you, it's really difficult to squeeze the answers out of your brain. What we got to do is we got to get in motion. We got to start doing something. And kind of like what I was saying, like, even if you know what you don't want to do, going in the opposite direction of that often helps. Like just as an example, like even when I was starting my career, when I was still in university and I was unsure of like what direction to take my career. I remember like one summer I was, I really loved marketing at school. And like, that's when my marks started turning around because I started to have like a passion and an interest for it. Like the economics and the operations classes, like I just wanted to hurl, you know what I mean? Like those were not my jam, but marketing, like I was excited to go to those classes. And I've always been a sports guy. So one summer I remember like, I just went into Google and I just typed in sports plus marketing. And I found out like there's a whole industry, and it's just about, and so I share this story because that ultimately led me to like a great summer internship. And I discovered that sports marketing was not totally, the direction I wanted to go in, but you find clues along the way. And if you stand still and you do nothing and you try to intellectually figure it out, you're just going to get more frustrated. What I advise people to do is just take that next right step, take a step in a direction, because you'll start to learn about yourself, and you'll start to find clues along the way once you get into motion.
Yeah, totally. I can relate to that. When I qualified as a lawyer, and I'd worked really hard to get to that point. And then when I got there, I was like, this isn't it. Like, I really enjoy what I'm doing, but there's something missing. And so I went on this kind of journey of exploration. And then I came across coaching. And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's a whole industry around coaching. And then that took me down a path. And then that's where now I have a portfolio career. So I'm a lawyer and I'm also a coach. And for me, that fulfills both sides. And the complete picture is great. But if I didn't, start looking into something, then I'd be stuck feeling completely unfulfilled. So
totally. Yeah. And that's the great thing about today. Like, today is like the most amazing time to be alive, because literally, like, no matter what you're interested in, like, no matter what piques your interest, what lights you up, I guarantee you will be able to find people who are building a career and a business around it. Like, trust me when I say, I get exposed to the most crazy things in the world when it comes to like markets that people have built businesses around. Like, here's an example. There's a woman down in, I think it's in Nashville. Her name is Tamara Bennett. Okay. And she's in our community, in our tribe community. And, I love hearing like how people implement, what it is that we teach. And so she shared her story with me. And so Tamara started a membership site, welcomed over 400 monthly paying members. I think it's at $30 a month. Mm-hmm. And here's the market. She teaches people how to create decorative door hangers, like things that you'd put on a door, like decorative door hangers. 400 members. She's built a whole business around decorative door hangers. Like, and these things they pop up like this all the time. And so it's the greatest time to be alive, because no matter what you're interested in, you can absolutely find a career or build a business around those interests. And that's why, I'm so grateful for the internet. I'm so grateful for what it's exposed us to and opened our eyes to. And man, it's an awesome time.
It is, totally. I say it to people all the time. Like, if you're stuck, there's totally stuff you can do. Like, we have the internet. There's no excuse. Everything's at your fingertips. So let's get going.
Exactly.
So talk to me a bit about how life looks in terms of juggling the demands of work and family life. Because often I think people feel like, if you run your own business and you have your own schedule, that means that it's a lot easier to juggle. And that's not always the case, especially if you have a successful business and you've got loads of things that you're doing. Sometimes it's harder to draw the line. So can you talk to me about how it looks for you?
Yeah, well, listen, when you got your own business, it is way harder, because like when you're working for somebody else, you can just shut off, right? Like, there's an expectation of like, 40 hours a week as an example. And I get it. Some careers like are more demanding than others, but at the end of the day, there's your boundaries. When you run your own business, there are no boundaries. And so, that's the problem. That's the problem, because when you're passionate about your work and you have no boundaries, you'll want to do it all the time. Yeah. And so when that is the case, this is where you've got to be very, very careful, especially when it comes to raising a family. Like, this, for me, my wife and kids are my highest priority. Like, spending time with them is highest priority, especially now. Like, my kids are young, and my friend and mentor in this capacity, Jim Shields, he really put it in perspective for me. He said, look, Stu, you have 18 summers with your kids. Like, and so every year you just subtract another summer off of that 18. And when you think about it in that way, like, that hits you like right between the eyes. And so for me, like, this time is precious, because not only do we have a limited amount of time, but it is the time when we shape their perspective, we shape their thoughts, we shape their beliefs, we shape their confidence. And so I want to speak into that as much as possible. I'm so grateful because I had two wonderful parents. I came from a household where my parents, they worked really hard. Like, they were two blue collar workers. Both my parents worked two full-time jobs. My dad worked from 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. in a high school, helping kids with special needs. And then 4 nights a week, he would work from 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. in a group home with people with special needs. And then my mom was similar. She worked 9 to 3 in an elementary school with kids with autism. And then 3 nights a week, the 3 nights that my dad wasn't working, my mom would work in a fine dining restaurant. And so my parents worked all the time, but every spare minute that they had, they were at every soccer game, every basketball game, every volleyball game. They were there for us, as kids. And so like I grew up, with parents who spoke into me and created this belief that I could do anything. Like I literally could, whatever I wanted to do in life, I could do. And so that was the greatest gift that they gave me. And I want to be able to give that same gift to my kids. And that takes time. That doesn't, like being with your kids, it just takes time. And so how does that factor into the way that we work? Well, I realized pretty quickly that like a job, I have to create boundaries. I have to create boundaries and rules for myself that I can ensure that my highest priority is my highest priority. So here's just a couple examples of some of those rules. So every morning I take my kids to school. That's my thing. That's my morning routine. I'm up with them. I spend time with them in the morning. I have breakfast with them. I get them ready for school, and together we go to school. And when we go to school, my whole goal is to like get them like fired up and excited for the day. So we have the music cranked. We're singing all kinds of songs. They get to pick the playlist. Like it's like this fun, get them energized and excited going to school. And we have so many great memories like of our, to school trips, if you will. Then I'll go to work. And so then my day though ends at 4, no matter what, my day ends at 4. Like even as we're doing this interview, there's a reason that they're at this time because I just don't book any interviews or anything or schedule any work after the 4 p.m. And so when I go home, it's the same thing. I'm off of work and it's like, it's them time. And so this is when we're like doing gymnastics, we're playing outside, we're swimming in the pool, we're with my daughter. And now my son's getting into it too, which is like reading. And my daughter loves to write. And my son, he's got a lot more energy. So we're like wrestling, and running outside with the dog. But it's just time. It's just time with them. Not time where like I'm half there and half thinking about work. It's time for them. And so same thing, like my wife does the same thing. And so we're both like there with the kids all the time as a family. And, then we have our routines. Like we have dinner together. We're always, at the dinner table together. We talk about our days. We have conversations. Like even the other day, this past weekend, it was awesome because we were on a family walk through the woods and the topic of goals came up because it's so we started talking to the kids about goals and we were talking about our goals, like my goals and Amy's goals for the year. And then we were talking to the kids about their goals. And it's just fun because we get back and like my son was writing, we got a big piece of chart paper and he was writing his, number one goal on his chart paper. And then my daughter had hers. And, my son's goal is to be able to read a chapter book by the end of the year. So he's learning to read. So that's his goal. And then my daughter's goal was to write a chapter book, so she's really into writing. So
her writing.
Exactly. But this is the kind of stuff like you need time. You need time with your kids. And those precious moments, they happen, in those conversations. And they happen when you're on the trail and you see deer, running by and you share that moment together. And you can always revisit those memories. And so boundaries are really important. So that's an example of one of my daily boundaries. Like another example is that when I am traveling, inevitably, like I get asked to speak at a lot of events. I run my own events. We run our own events for our business and for our charity. And so one of the kind of rules of thumb that we have as a family is that I am never away from the kids for more than 4 days at a time, twice a month. So basically, like I will never travel more than twice a month for more than 4 days. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So the flip side of that though is what happens, Stu, like if something comes up and there's like 2 amazing opportunities in the same month, do you ever kind of just like, just kind of bend the rules for this month? And the answer is yes, but. So if 2 big opportunities come and I've already been away from them once, what we do is we fly Amy and the kids with me to that particular spot. So we're still together as a unit and still together as a family. So that's just kind of like one of those rules. And so I say no a lot because it will pull me away from the kids and from the family. And then similarly, like if it ever does happen, like next month, it's actually going to happen. And so one of the rules is like, okay, well, we're going as a family. And so then we'll figure, we do fun things as a family. I think the biggest piece of advice is to establish rules for yourself. Because if you don't, well, then it's really easy to just get swallowed up and consumed by work. And one day leads to two day leads to a week and weeks and then months and then years. And before you know it, you've lost that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about the amount of years that you have left with them. Like my friend was saying a similar thing, was saying there's only 9 years that your child is in single digits. And that really hit me. And my children are young. So my son is 3.5 and my daughter's 1.5. So we're in that crazy stage of them being like totally all consuming, but it's just so amazing to see them like absorbing everything and you've been able to pour into them and then them learning stuff. And I might have said something to my son like 2 weeks ago. And then he's like, yeah, remember you said this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I did say that. And he's applying it in context. And I'm like, this is just amazing. So I think it's important for parents to, when you are juggling work and family life, to realize that your role as a parent is so, so important. And you're building a legacy through your children. So don't necessarily think that, if you have taken a step away from your career for a while and you're investing in your children, that time isn't time well spent, because it totally is.
And to that point, like, there's time with your kids when you're doing like activities with them and stuff like that. But there's time when they're just like what you said, they're just observing you. And it's really important to be mindful of like what they are observing that you are doing and that you're thinking and that you're feeling, because as you are experiencing those things, they're observing and watching and processing themselves. So like just a real simple example is that when we exercise, like I like to exercise in front of the kids or with the kids, because that's like one of those things where they see it and they it just becomes part of like them and what we do, and it's the same with like the goal setting. Like, I love my parents. I've already expressed my love for my parents, but we never once talked about goals, like let alone like actually doing it with them. And so I can't imagine like what, the impact that has, or like when I speak like at our live events, like one of the things that just melts my heart is like involving the kids where they are on stage with me. Like I've seen my daughter go from like at 3 years old, like terrified to get on stage, to where I eased into it, where we did like a dance party on the stage at a break. So there was like nobody was there. It was just her and I just having a little dance party up on the stage, to then like she getting more comfortable being on stage and then speaking in the microphone. And like this year, it was amazing. She had made these bracelets. And so I said, because she wanted to make some extra money. And I said, okay, well, listen, you have a captive audience of like 600 people. Like, what could you sell these people? And so she's like, what about the bracelets? I'm like, yeah, you could sell bracelets. And I'm like, but you got to actually sell them. So she made them. And then she came up on stage and she offered them. And I was just like, this is amazing.
Oh my goodness.
The only fun part about that was that she sold the bracelets for $5 each. And so people would come and they'd give her a 20 and she would just be like, thank you. And I was like, okay, I got some teaching to do here about like, money and like not everything being equal. But like,
I'll just take the money. Just give me the money.
Yeah, she's just like, thank you. And they're just, but like, this is what it's about. Like when I think of family and I think about kids, it's like, it's involving them and intertwining them in our lives, not like these two separate things. Like,
right.
Work over here and that's what mommy and daddy do. And then there's family time. No, listen, in the lives that we live, they're intertwined. And so like we involve our kids, we talk to our kids about what's going on and when there's a busy time and when we experience challenges. Like I talked, this year was a tough year. We had a terrible tragedy. We lost 3 of our friends in a terrible tragedy. And it definitely like, it sent me, it derailed me for sure. But I didn't hide that from the kids, like that created great conversation to have with the kids and to be able to process that with the kids. And I don't go into all the details of it, but, like Marla could see that I was upset and she's like, what's going on, Dad? And I said, Daddy just lost some really dear friends. And, she asked about it and I shared the overview of what happened and that they got in an accident. And I said, it's just really hard because like, they were very close to mommy and daddy's hard, and we're going to miss them terribly. And, and being able to have those conversations with the kids, it just requires you to be there and to be present and to be mindful of the fact that, your kids are always watching you. And so what are you doing in front of them to inspire them in some capacity as well? And so I think that that's just as important as like actually doing activities with them, is like, being mindful of what they're watching and observing as well.
Yeah, that is so, so powerful. I think on the flip side, sometimes my son will say things and I'm like, oh, because like the other day I went into the living room and they had like thrown all the toys on the floor. And then I went in and I was like, and then my son went, what's going on here? And I was like, that's what I say all the time. So he picks up those stuff as well. So yeah, it's definitely good to be mindful about what you're saying and doing in front of the children.
This episode is brought to you by The Collective, our monthly membership community for ambitious working mums who are navigating career transitions beyond motherhood. Now, you've heard from Stu how he's helped thousands of business owners to build membership sites the right way. Well, I'm pleased to say that I am one such business owner. So I took everything that Stu taught me and built The Collective membership community in a way that helps members to get results. So they are given the roadmap, the tools, and the support that they need to move boldly towards their career goals. So our members are doing some awesome things like finding dream part-time roles, negotiating new levels of flexibility with their current employers, growing their businesses to 6 figures in revenue, and the list goes on, and all while raising fabulous little people. The doors to The Collective will be opening again in the new year, so if you would be interested in joining us, then head over to lightboxcoaching.com/waitlist and put your name down, and then you'll be the first to hear when the doors reopen for enrollment. Okay, so let's jump back into our conversation with Stu.
So I went on a mission trip a few years ago to East Africa. So I spent a week in Rwanda and a week in Kenya. And
Amazing.
That whole experience was just literally just changed the course of my career and how I thought about everything. And I know that when I came back, I was like, I need to be doing something. I need to be doing more. So can you talk to me a bit about your experience and what led you to start your charity in Kenya?
Yeah, well, listen, let's just put the cards out on the table first. This was completely my wife. And I'm so grateful to her because I am not the visionary in this particular space. She is. But she's always had this passion for like travel. And like she loves to travel. She loves to travel to like all the common tourist destinations, but she has equal passion to travel to like the places that nobody has gone to. And so when we were together, like it took me 7 years to convince her that I was the man of her dreams. And so during that time, it was one heck of a sales process, let me tell you. But so it took me a long time, but long story short, like during that time, she was traveling all over the world. And she was traveling to like the places that people commonly go to and the places that they don't. And part of that, she saw like so many kids who were in these remote areas of these various countries who wanted an education, but either couldn't afford it or the school was so far away that it was just impossible for them to go to. And, she was a teacher for 10 years. So education is an important part of her DNA. And she just kept coming back and she just kept saying like, man, there's something, these kids want education and they just can't get it. Like, I would just love to be able to figure that out and do something. And so she kept volunteering. She would work with these volunteer organizations and she would do all this kind of stuff. And then one year, it was December 2006, Oprah had this show called The Big Give. And she would go into like a community usually in the States, and they would contribute like $100,000 or something, and they would transform like some family's life. And Amy and I just loved watching this show. And we were always so inspired. And I remember this one particular episode, like it was a really emotional show. So we're both like, crying after, and we're just talking about it. And then she said to me, she turned to me afterwards. She's like, we should do something like this. And I was like, yeah, babes, that sounds awesome. She's like, no, I'm serious. Like we should do something like this, but for a community in a developing country. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Again, this was like second week in December. And I said to her, I'm like, well, when do you want to do this? And she said, over the Christmas holidays. And I was like, I said, baby cakes, this is like in 2 weeks, like that's a pretty tight timeline. And she's like, look, you're the business guy. You figure out how to raise the money. I'm the traveler. I'll figure out where we're going and what we're going to do. I was like, okay. It's not that easy, babes, And so anyways, so we did our first fundraiser, raised just over $14,000. And she found some community way up in the mountains of El Salvador. They didn't speak a word of English. We didn't speak a word of Spanish. There was a lot of acting going on. Oh my goodness. It was, and Amy always made me do the acting. Like I was always like, anyways, another story. But it was an amazing experience. And she always told me, she said, you'll understand it like when you experience it. And so sure enough, like I remember we were on that plane coming home and I looked at her and I said, babes, I get it. Okay, so let's figure out how to make this, a more formal thing. And so in Canada, it takes a long time, like to get nonprofit status. It's not an easy thing. Like it usually takes anywhere between 5 to 7 years to get an official nonprofit status. But my wife, Amy, she's like a pit bull on a bone. Like, she would just relentlessly follow up and follow up and follow up. And we got it in 2 years. And so from there, it was the strangest thing. Like, I can't explain it, but like, we both had a heart for Africa. Like we had never been, but we were both drawn to that side of the world. And I don't know why. Like, I can't explain it. But the first place we ever went to was Ghana. And so we went to Ghana and we stayed in a refugee camp for a week.
Wow.
And listen, that was eye-opening. Amy and I have a code word when things are a little challenging when we're traveling, we always say culture. and we had a lot of culture on that trip, but it was eye-opening. And for me, like I'm just a big kid. So like the way I connect with kids when I travel is like, I just play soccer. Like I just play games and I play soccer. And so like, I grew up playing soccer. I played at a really high level. So it was fun because we're going over to Ghana and these kids are unbelievable, and then there's this like big white guy who, they would never pass the ball to. And then finally, when I got the ball, I felt like I had to prove myself to these kids. So I had to like do a couple moves and then score a goal. And then they're like, okay, like he can play. But like, it was amazing. It was amazing. And so we started in this community in Ghana and we started helping with the school and we implemented a feeding program and the school attendance like skyrocketed. It literally doubled, in the week following implementing that program from 300 kids to over 600. Because part of the problem is that like the kids don't go to school even if it's there because their families are keeping them home to like go and find food.
Yeah.
And so the parents saw this as for the opportunity that it was, which was like, hey, our kids can get a meal, like send them to school. And so that was the beginning. And then ultimately the reason we landed in Kenya was because we wanted to really formalize this. And we knew like at a grassroots level to keep things lean, we needed to have like an amazing contact that could serve as our point person in whatever country that we were working with. And ultimately that led us to this amazing woman. Her name is Irene. We call her the Mother Teresa of Africa. She is unbelievable. And she was stationed in Kenya. And so we went to Kenya and we met with her and yeah, she's just incredible. Right away, we knew that she was our gal. And so then we were looking for our first community that we could help. And so she had her finger on the pulse of all these communities. And so she took us to this one community and we're meeting with the chairman of this community. And these people, they're called IDP camps. And essentially it's they're internal refugees. They're internally displaced persons. Okay. And in Kenya in 2008, they had this election and long story short, it got really violent. And literally hundreds of thousands of people were basically told to move. Otherwise, they would likely be killed. And so if you can imagine yourself, being a lawyer or myself being a business owner or like a doctor or dentist or teachers or anybody who's got a career and then literally like being picked up and moved to these fields out in the middle of nowhere and given a piece of land and saying, okay, start your life over again. Like I have trouble hanging pictures on the wall straight, let alone like, having to build exactly. Like completely start your life from scratch, like in survival mode. But that's what's happened. And so In this particular community, there was hundreds of these families, and there's nothing, like no water, no roads, no infrastructure, no nothing. Like it's just the land and them, and they're having to survive. And so, I'm meeting with the chairman of this community, and I'm talking, about, the idea of possibly building a school, because the nearest school was so far away that none of the kids were going. And so I'm just trying to figure out what things cost. And for me, it was a really strange experience, because I always had this guilt around money. I didn't realize it at the time, but there's another backstory behind it. But long story short, in my business would always get to a certain level, but I can never break through that level. And a huge part of it was because I had this internal guilt about the amount of money that I was making. I was in my mid-20s making more than both of my parents combined. And so it was just this weird thing. I felt guilty about the amount of money that I was making. So the moment that changed for me was when I was in this community in Kenya. I'm talking to the chairman and I'm asking him what things cost. And I asked, how much does it cost to fund the full-time salary of a teacher? And he thought about it for a minute and he said, it's about $100 a month. And at the time, the software that we were selling, which was Wishlist Member, we would sell a single site license for $97. So essentially $100. And so immediately I had this thought. I was like, well, wait a minute. If I sell one more license of this software and I just allocate it to funding the full-time salary of the teacher, imagine the impact that I could have. And then the real light bulb went off, which was well, wait a minute. What if you just make a whole lot more sales and dedicate a whole lot more to the causes you're passionate about? Imagine the impact you could have then. And it was in that moment that I realized the more money I make, the more impact I can have. And so making money, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, I look at it like it's one of the most honorable things that you and I can do, because money, especially now that we've, our nonprofit is, been running for many, many years. Money is the greatest thing that you can give, more than time, because time and volunteering time is great, but it's very limited. Right. Money creates leverage. Money gives you the ability to do a whole lot more good. And so it was an amazing turning point for me, because I really realized money's a very honorable thing. And once my mindset shifted on that, everything changed. My business grew exponentially. The amount of money that I was able to generate, I crushed through that plateau that I used to have. It's so funny to look back on now, because it's been less than 10 years at that moment in time. But when I think about how I limited myself, and it was all a mindset thing. It was nothing. It was just a mindset thing. But now the charity has just given us the ability to be able to, I believe, really bring out the best in who we are. And so, yeah, we've been building schools in Kenya, and along the way, what's been fun about it is bringing my other entrepreneurial friends on this journey with us. And, this year we had our biggest donor trip. We had close to 70 entrepreneurs on this trip, and many brought some of their families. And it's just amazing to watch them have the same experience that my wife gifted me with, in Kenya, and seeing their eyes and their hearts open up to what's possible as entrepreneurs. And so this is why I love being an entrepreneur, because there's no limits on the amount of money that we can make. So there's no limits, there's no cap, which means there's no limits and no cap on the impact that we can have. And so I love making money. I love making money because money just affords me the ability to have impact on not just, causes that we're passionate about, but even, my wife and I do something every year. We do something called a super surprise. And a super surprise is we pick a loved one, a family member, or even just close friends that, and we create the experience of a lifetime for them. Something that they would just love to do, but they just don't have the means or capacity to do it. And so this year was our most epic, experience of all. But, and I could tell you about that. But the point of the matter is that money gives you the ability to have an impact on your family, your community, where you live, your community online, and then also the causes that you're passionate about. And so that's why I love being an entrepreneur. And that's ultimately the connection with the charity has just fueled that.
Yeah, I love that, because so many people have a different view, like what you were saying about feeling guilty. So often people will talk about feeling guilty about making money, or saying things like, money is bad, or it's the root of evil and stuff like that. So having that different perspective and recognizing that it's money, shouldn't have anything attached to it. It just gives you opportunity to do things. And so
absolutely.
I love that perspective. And I love the fact that you then take that and then teach other people how to make money through membership sites.
Yeah. And to inspire them to to have their own ripple effect, and it is happening. Like, there's a great story that happened a few months ago. His name's Scott Musgrave. And he shared the story in our community where, he was at a fundraising event last year. And it was, a fundraising event for a cause that they're passionate about. And somebody in the audience anonymously donated $10,000. At the time, I think he and his wife contributed a couple $100. But he turned to his wife and he said, like, I want to be that anonymous donor next year. Like, I want to be the person who writes the anonymous check for $10,000. And then he shared in the community that, like, after he launched his membership site, it's taken off. And it afforded him the ability to where this year he was the person writing that anonymous check for $10,000. And he said it was just like, it was the most amazing experience to be able to do that. And that's what this is about. Like, that's why entrepreneurship is so amazing, because it just gives us that ability to be able to make money and then allocate it to the things that we're passionate about.
Yes, I love it. I love, like, hearing all the stories and being inspired by people just doing such amazing things. It's just so inspirational.
Totally.
So one of the things that I like to share on the podcast is an inspirational quote or a mantra or a saying, because I love them for myself and I think it's always good for us to share with others. So I know you have a few, but is there one that you would share with people to say that this is a saying that you kind of often share or live by?
Yeah, so there's a couple that I want to share with you. The first one is one that my dad shared with me like years and years ago. And it's a quote from St. Augustine. And the quote is this: faith is to believe in what you do not see. The reward for that faith is to see what you believe. So let me say it again. Faith is to believe in what you do not see. The reward for that faith is to see what you believe. And so it's, when you think about, like, even building a business or, a nonprofit or even kids, like raising kids, like, we have no idea what they're going to turn out like. We have no idea, like, 10 years from now, 15 years, 20 years from now, what kind of little human beings they're going to blossom into. But we got to have that faith that what we're doing is leading us to what we believe will be true. And the reward for that faith is to ultimately see what we believe. And that's been absolutely true in, like, my career, my business, and my relationships. And yeah, so that's one quote that I love. The other one is from my favorite band, Mumford & Sons. And I just came back from their concert last night, so I am on a Mumford & Sons high. But one of the lyrics that they have in their songs is, where you invest your love, you invest your life. And I just think, like, that's another one of those quotes. Like, when we talk about parenting, when we talk about, like, raising our kids, and where you invest your love is where you invest your life. And so, like, if you're investing more of your love in, working yourself to the bone and, becoming a workaholic. And I got to also say, like, I am not one of these guys or gals that subscribes to the only way to success is to hustle your face off 24/7, because I just don't believe that that's, do we need to work hard? Yes. But within those boundaries of what what we talked about earlier, during that time period, absolutely, like, hustle, work your butt off. But at the end of the day, like, there has to be separation. And what I believe is that there's this poor message that's being communicated to entrepreneurs these days, which is, like, the only way to succeed is to work your face off 24/7 and forget everything else. Forget about, you got to sacrifice family. You got to sacrifice the things that you love to do outside of work. You got to sacrifice your hobbies and your interests and your passions. Heck no. Like, I'm just here to say, like, that is total BS, because the reality is that, just like that quote from Mumford & Sons, where you invest your love, you invest your life. And ultimately, like, I want to invest my love in the people that matter most to me. They're my life. And so I want to make sure that I'm allocating time for that. I want to make sure that that's the highest priority. Yeah. So those are my 2 quotes.
Oh, love it. I love it. I'm so excited. So inspiring, Stu. I'm like, yes. Awesome. So if people want to learn more about you, about Tribe, and about what you're up to, where is the best place for them to check you out?
Well, listen, I have 2 places that I will give people. Actually, do you mind if I give 3? Like, am I being overzealous with 3? Okay. They're all easy though. Okay, they serve different purposes. So the easy one to remember is stu.me, stu.me. That's my personal website. But the other 2 that I want to give is that the Tribe training that we have, where we teach people how to take what it is that they know and the influence that they have and turn it into recurring revenue through membership sites. And if you can't tell, I'm really passionate about this because what we teach works and it transforms lives and it helps people do all the things that we're talking about here. The best place to go is tribeworkshop.com. And so once a year, we run a free workshop. And then at the end of the workshop, if people want to continue working with us, awesome. But if they don't, so many people get tons of value from it. Like there was a story actually of this woman from Africa last year who watched our free training and from the free training launched her membership site. And it was an amazing story because I saw her this year and she works with women who have been abused and who are trying to find their way after they've been abused and they've left that abusive relationship and they're trying to find their way. She started a membership site for them, and the stories that she was sharing with me are like mind-blowingly awesome. That came from our the seed of the idea came from our free workshop. So we run that once a year. Tribeworkshop.com is where to go to find that. The other one is that I'm passionate about marketing because I believe marketing is like the fastest path for us to be able to generate more revenue and therefore generate a bigger impact. And so I share all kinds of like ideas and tips and tricks and behind the scenes of what we're doing to grow our business on my Marketing Your Business podcast. And so if you just go to marketingyourbusiness.com, you'll see where you can listen to the podcast and where you can subscribe to that. And 3 times a week, we deliver episodes.
So awesome. And can I just say, so I am a member of Tribe and I use all that I learned from Stu to launch the collective membership. And without you, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I just want to say thank you because my idea was, I think it was last year. So when I was setting my goals in 2017, I was like, in 2018, I want to launch a membership site. I had no idea how I was going to do that. And so through Tribe, I learned how to do that. And now I have members and it's just exciting. So I want to say, if you're interested in that, then definitely check out Stu's training. So thank you.
You're amazing. Well, listen, we got to share your story with the community as well, because like your story will inspire other people. It's that's the one thing that I love about like hearing the stories is that it's not about, it's about that story, your story, inspiring somebody else to launch their membership site. And it has that ongoing like ripple effect. So thank you for sharing.
Yes, awesome. Well, thank you for spending time with us today, Stu. I really appreciate it. It's been awesome getting to know about your journey. And I'm sure there's lots of listeners who will be inspired by what you've shared with us.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And to your audience, listen, making money is a very good and healthy thing. And as entrepreneurs, the only thing that we got to do is we've got to put boundaries around it so that we keep the one thing or the main thing. As Stephen Covey would say, keep the main thing, the main thing. Yes. And at the end of the day, when you love and are passionate about your family, you got to make sure that's your main thing. So just put boundaries around it. And that's your main thing. So just put boundaries around it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Stu.
Oh, wasn't that an awesome interview? Stu shared so much with us and his journey to where he is today has been so interesting. And one of the things I love about his story is that he was really true to himself in deciding not to continue on the path that he was on when he came straight out of business school and landed what seemed to be an ideal role. So he knew it wasn't right for him. So he took action to find an alternative and he tried out different things until he arrived at something that felt right for him and also worked for his family. So I think we can take inspiration from that. And if you're somebody who's feeling stuck and feeling like you want to do something different and you're not quite sure where to go next in your career, I want to urge you not to stay stuck where you are and to seek out help. One of the things that I've created that might be of assistance to you is a guide, and it's 17 career options for you to consider post-baby that may not have been available before. So we've had so much change over the last few years in terms of technology and what is possible, remote working, different ways of working, different ways of doing the same type of role in certain industries. And so in this guide, you're going to find some options that you may not have thought about before and things that you might want to explore and consider. So if you think that will be useful for you, head over to lightboxcoaching.com/career options, and you're going to be able to download that guide and get some inspiration so you can get moving towards figuring out what it is you want to do, because life is too short. It's too short for you to be doing work that you don't love. And if you're going to be spending time away from your babies, then it's pretty important for you to figure out what you want to be doing in that time that you're away from them. Now, if you want to connect with Stu and find out more about him and the work that he does, then I will put all the links to what he mentioned in the show notes. So his website, his tribe workshop, and also his podcast. So you can head over to lightboxcoaching.com/episode 52 and you can get those links. If you enjoyed the show, then I urge you to go and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. We have some great guests lined up for you coming in 2019. Next week, I'm going to be speaking to the lovely Anna Runyon, who's actually the person who introduced me to Stu Mclaren. And she's going to be sharing with us a bit about her journey. And so I'd love for you to check that out. So make sure you subscribe. And now I'm going to head off because it's time to prepare for Christmas. So I wish you and your family a wonderful Christmas, and I look forward to connecting with you again next week. Until then, look after you and look after your babies.